Like today we're with Chris Bird. Chris, if you can just share who you are and what it is you do.
Yeah, my name is Chris Bird. I'm the chairman of Riskwell. I'm also the chief development officer for a company called Meridian Resources. I also have my own consultancy company called P3L Fusion. And then on top of that, just to make things a bit more interesting, I'm the discipline head of risk for Fiteq, which is the Federation of International Consulting Engineers.
Excellent. And then where are you from? When I had a look, you worked in your grandfather had a steam engine museum, so you worked in steam engines with trams and bikes, always quite mechanical, and then you were a bike shop and a fish shop. So
That's right.
where did you come from? How did you get here?
Yeah, well, I think I was brought up in a little fishing town called Lowestoft in East Anglia, which actually was quite to do with fishing, but also had a lot to do with oil and gas.
Okay.
And my grandfather was an engineer. He loved being an engineer. He was quite of a strange or interesting character. He wanted to leave a legacy, so he set up a thing called the East Anglian Transport Museum. And the first tram he bought was the day that I was born.
Wow.
Back in 1960.
Is that a gift for your mum?
I don't know, but he was always very, very keen on transport. So I grew up right from a youngster involved with steam engines and trams and trains, and getting involved with him in his workshop with machine lathes and all sorts of things. And then when I was 13, I got offered a job in a motorbike shop. And it was strange. At 13 or 14, I'd go out and help clean the bikes and then help the mechanic. And then I'd done all my O-levels. So I'd done all my O-levels and I started doing A-levels. So I'd done maths, physics, chemistry, so science background.
Yeah.
And there was this little advert. I can still see it as close as I possibly can today. It's just about 5 little lines that said, trainee engineering manager, put your CV in. So I thought, that sounds quite interesting. I'll do that. It was a company called Beecham's, if you've heard of Beecham's Pills,
Yeah.
which are now GlaxoSmithKline. And so I applied for it, and they said, come along for an interview. So I didn't tell anybody again. I went along for the interview, and I said to them, look, I'm quite happy to work for you. I want to do a degree. So if you employ me, I want you to sponsor me on a degree course. So they said, well, yes, but you would do an apprenticeship first. So it's a 5-year mechanical apprenticeship. And we'll only sponsor on a degree course if you're in the top 10%.
Wow.
So we shook hands on it. But then I went to my form tutor. I can still see his name. I wouldn't tell you his name. I don't embarrass him at all now. But he said, whatever you do, do not do that. You will destroy your life. You will regret it forever. If you leave school, you don't do A-levels. Because that's the best route, A-levels degree. And I said, no, I'm leaving. So I left after 2 weeks of A-levels and joined Beecham's and then done this apprenticeship. They then took me and they put me on a 4-year degree course after that.
Okay.
In mechanical and chemical engineering. And then they put me through a graduate training scheme with executive management program and everything else. So I signed on. It was 11 years of roughly about 60 to 70 hours a week.
Wow.
For 11 years, from 16 to 27. And that's really what established my career, but gave me that foundation then in my life in terms of understanding engineering right from the ground up rather than just the academic part of it.
Yeah. And from there, where did you go? Because you've had quite an extinguished career in oil and gas over a long period of time. So where did you go from? How do you get from Beecham's to Mall?
Yeah, well, it's quite an interesting one because my final 2 years with Beecham, so I have quite a lot of integrity. So they spent a lot of time and effort on me in Beecham's, but most of my friends were in the oil and gas industry. So where I was after 11 years, I had 4 or 5 graduates working for me. I was the energy manager across the number of sites. I was also their special projects manager doing all these special projects. And I also doubled up as a production manager for them. But at the time I was getting paid just under £11,000 a year. Remember, this is back in the mid-70s, but most of my friends who had none of that training were in the oil and gas industry earning £25,000 to £30,000 a year. So I thought, that sounds quite good.
So financially, you thought, I've got to get into oil and gas.
Yeah. I was quite pleased because doing that 2 years with Beecham's, I saved them probably millions of pounds in terms of the energy efficiency stuff that I'd done, I'd done 2 years of running a production plant. We got 2 record production years from that. So that was where I was. But then I started to apply for the oil and gas industry because I thought, with all my background, I must be able to get in the oil and gas industry. And actually, it was really, really tough.
Yeah.
So I applied to all the main operators, and they didn't want to know, basically, because I think they wanted people that were from red brick university, straight from university. They didn't want people that would gone through apprenticeships at the time.
And when you were trying to do that, was that a good time in oil and gas, or was it a downturn?
No, it was a pretty good time.
Yeah.
Everything was quite buoyant at the time. So I applied for quite a few jobs. Then one of my friends said there's this little company called Van Systems.
Okay.
So I applied to those, and the guy he's still probably working somewhere, a guy called Glenn Brown. He took a chance with me and he said, I'll take you on board. And what we'll do, we'll train you up in reservoir engineering, completion design, using explosives and all sorts of different bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And I'll train you up. So I thought, well, that sounds a great start into the oil industry, because I will start to understand technology and technically where things are.
Yeah.
So they sent me away and I went to Heriot Watt and done reservoir engineering, done gravel packing, sand control, completion design, that sort of stuff. And it was a great experience. I was offshore doing the Great Storm of '87.
Sitting on the first one offshore.
Yes, yeah. And I remember being on the Ben Riach with 100-foot waves up like this.
Wow.
Going up all over the place.
And what was that like then? As your first experience being offshore, and that's what you're experiencing.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Just really brilliant. It's a bit like the action man in me, basically, is, if you want to be doing these things. And then they sent me down to West Africa.
Yeah.
And it was more of a frontier place at that time. And I remember that I was in a little hotel, just a little shack, really.
Where in Africa?
It was Gabon, Port-Gentil, down there. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, it's a bit warm in here. And the mosquitoes were inside the room, and then next thing you hear shouting and screaming, and then you hear gunfire and all these sort of things going on. You go, oh, I don't know what to do now. So I think the best thing to do is put the duvet over my head and close my eyes and go to sleep. Hope I was gone in the morning, which I had done. Yeah. It was just what happened was the power generation went down.
Yeah.
And of course all the locals then started uprising, making lots of fuss. From there, and then we worked in places like Thursday Island in the middle of Poole Harbour, and doing all sorts of really interesting things with explosives and all sorts of different bits and pieces.
Did you enjoy the traveling aspect of it?
Yeah, I think that was a good thing. I mean, we ended up going to, we were down in Africa, South America, down in Australia, across Europe. We'd done some work up in Friesland, which was just northern Holland. Even onshore in the UK, up at Welton, say down at Witch Farm, and then offshore. So that the variety was really, really interesting. But it gives you that base of understanding, about the subsurface elements of the oil and gas industry, but also about then how do you exploit those from a reservoir and optimum completion design.
So your background is, well, very well educated, and very fortunate, I think, in some of those positions to get those opportunities.
Yes.
But yeah, quite an impressive early start to your oil career, or just your career in general.
Yeah.
A lot of education coming into oil and gas. Again, more education and a good spread of the different parts of the industry. So from there, I mean, you're going forward in your career. You were Aker, Amex, Centrica, MOL. So how do you get from there to leading an operator?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing was for me was I always thought, well, if I'm going to be an operator, I'm going to run my own oil and gas company. Mm-hmm. What skills do I need? So that was for me first of all. So that's the first thing. So I needed subsurface. So I got that, some subsea skills. So I had that when I went to UWG. Which is now Action, which is now another big sort of contracting organization. Then when I first went into AMEC, I was with AMEC, but the guy that took me on board, a guy called Francis Kernan, he's a great guy, and he really believed him, and he said, I said, I don't know how a gas platform works.
Yeah, Francis still floating around now. Yeah.
And he said, I don't care. He said, I want you because I believe in you. What he wants. That was a really good step for me. So he took me on board, and I actually ended up inside BP as facilities facilities engineering manager for BP Bruce.
Right.
So I took BP Bruce from when it started up, and I'd done all the shutdowns, all the modifications on it. There's a couple of big projects that was across there. So I got all the asset management piece from that. And then from there, then I wanted to get the project piece. So what I'd done is with AMEC, they said to me, if you think you're a smart guy, he said, go and win marathon work for a job called Kingfisher. So basically they said, okay, so I looked at that and I had a guy working with me called Pat McIntosh. He was another great guy. And this is a little bit, my advice was always work with the best people you can find.
Yeah.
Which was, so we looked at Kingfisher, and it was, Marathon would always use Brown and Root. They would never use someone like AMEC because, it was an American company to American company, where that's at. So this project was benchmarked around about 55 million from Shell, by Marathon, by Brown and Root, and then IPA. And I think they said the minimum possible you could do this job for was about 50 million. So with AMEC, I went in, I said, I can do it for 32.
Okay.
And so we worked up a way of doing it for 32 million. And of course, then Shell, because it was a Shell project on the Bray asset. So they said, right, we're going to bring all the Shell guys in. You're going to be by yourself and nobody else. You're going to come in. We're going to grill you for a day about how you can do it for 32.
So how do you shave 40% off the cost of a...
Yeah, I'll come on to that one in a second, right? So, because let me just finish this piece first, which was, so they looked at it for the whole day and they said, okay, so right, you can have the contract, but if you go over 5 million, you've got to take some of the pain of the overruns.
Yeah.
So I said, that's okay. But if I go under 32 million, then I want a percentage of the savings. And because they thought it was impossible, they just said yes. So we signed the contract. We came in at million, half the benchmark number from that, and we made a lot of money from that job.
So where was the savings?
So the savings was very simple. It's when you look at risk, right? So most people look at risk as a threat. They don't look at the opportunities or the alternatives when you look at risk. So you need to change your mindset into being inquisitive about what's around you, which was interesting. I'd done a survey once. So I took 6 key attributes, and I'd done a survey across the industry to see what the best attributes were. And the lowest one was inquisitiveness.
Okay.
So the industry doesn't really teach you to really think outside the box or do things different. That comes from my grandfather, who was a little bit of a...
It's also an industry where they don't like change.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was looking at a job, and so normally if you're doing a big job on a platform, you build a big unit, and then you find a heavy lift vessel, and then you wait for the right time, and then you put it onto a heavy lift vessel, you take it off, and then you put it onto the platform. And that costs a lot of money because the heavy lift vessel costs a lot of money. Yeah. And then you're reliant on weather. So you've got waiting on weather, and you've got all these different things there. So I'm thinking, there's a drilling derrick on the platform, right? So how much can the drilling derrick lift? If it's got 15,000 foot of heavy drill pipe in there, it must be quite a lot. So I asked a question, they said, about 500 tons. So next question is, can we build these in 250 ton units and take them off the back end of a supply boat?
So just modularize it and do it yourself.
And put them on there. So we got me, it was three of us, as myself, a guy called Pat McIntosh, and a guy called Ramsey Fraser. Ramsey was another one of the really, really good engineer. And we looked at it and we designed it using MathCAD. And we believed we could do this because it's about the snatch loads off the supply boat.
Yeah.
So we put in damper systems in it, and we done it, and it was perfect. An absolutely brilliant job. But the interesting thing was nobody else has done it again.
Why not? Why would that not be a great case study?
The industry is very. I mean, I run a risk management company, but the industry is very risk adverse.
Yeah.
So sometimes you not even have to be a first, second, third, or fourth. You only have to be a fifth mover. Once you've done it 5 or 6 times, people then believe that it's safe enough and the risk has been reduced sufficiently to update that technology.
Yeah.
But if you look around what we do, all the first movers, quite a lot of them, they've added huge amounts of value, but they don't actually get embedded into the industry. So some things that I done was after Piper Alpha as Piper Bravo, and it done monobore completion. So I came up with which I got a patent for, which was a monobore completion tool, of how we could perforate under balance with monobore completions. And the whole of Piper Bravo was done with that really successfully, but it was hardly ever used again.
Yeah.
With Venture, we done the round FPSO. Okay, so there was 2 built into the UK, and they were really highly successful and a lot cheaper than standard FPSOs, but they haven't moved forward.
Yeah.
One of the other ones we done, which probably one of my favourite ones, was when we were with Venture, we bought CH4 off. Unfortunately, as you know, Phil Kirk's just passed away. Unfortunately, he was a brilliant chap. I really like Phil a lot.
Yeah.
But we bought CH4 off him at the time because it had a field called Chiswick in there, which is carboniferous and is tight gas, very, very difficult. And everybody stayed away from it because it needed fracking.
Yeah.
And there was only 2 frack vessels in the North Sea. And they were tied up with like Conoco and some of the big players. So if you bought these fields, you're never going to frack them.
Yeah.
So what we done again, I said, well, there must be a different way. We worked with Schlumberger, and basically he said, can we actually put a frack vessel on the back end of a supply boat? And he said, I think we can do that. So we hired the big plane to get the pumps across from Singapore. We drove up some sand chiefs from Algeria, and then we put that on the back of a supply boat. And we had probably about 15 different nationalities working with us. They had to bring some guys together from all over, and some of them didn't even speak English.
Yeah.
And we took the vessel offshore, and it was one of the best frack jobs in the North Sea, using temporary equipment on the back end of a supply boat.
Wow.
So it's things you can do, but you have to have that courage.
Yeah. So you've mentioned in the past, and you've gave some examples there for lessons learned that have not been followed through, or we're an industry that kind of forget the lessons we've learned. So as an industry, it's becoming tougher and tougher to make margin. And why do you think that is? Why are they not reviewing these and going back and identifying these things that did save money, save time, save people, save resource?
Yeah, I think it's because a lot of it is in a few individuals' minds. There's not a repository in the industry for it. And the industry is getting harder. There's a number of things why it's getting harder. First of all, in the early stages, when I was with Venture, the early days of Venture, I mean, what made Venture? Was it something that was strategically really successful, or what it was? When I first came on board with Venture, we had this project called Goosander, and I wanted to do it because I looked at the reservoir right across, and you go, it's got to be like that. Hasn't got to be like the reservoir guys. And we done Goosander, and we done it for around about $20 a barrel. Okay, and it came in at the time. Oil price went to $140 a barrel. So it's making $120 a barrel net profit on 26,000 barrels a day for 3 years.
Wow. So when was this? 2013?
It's about 2005.
2005. Okay.
So that was really what got Dana and Venture off the ground.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you got 2 little companies, and then suddenly you just get this one Klondike field that's come in. Where
just making money.
But if you go today, you've got a number of things. One is a lot of the fields are very small. So when you've got a big field with maybe 1 billion barrels or 500 million or even 100 million barrels in, then you've got lots to play with.
Yeah.
If you've got the fields today and they're only 20, 30, 40 million barrels, you've got a lot less movement in there. So the actual complexity of getting the gas or the oil out of the ground is a lot harder.
Yeah.
Because the margins are a lot lower just purely on the volumes. That's number one. Okay. Number two is basically the cost base. Okay. So for instance, in the last about 15 years, we've seen about 120% rise in the cost base. And also because we're not now in the UK, we're not as profitable, a lot of the really good resources are going international. Right? So you've got a cost base with an issue with that one.
Yeah.
The third one is basically project delivery. This is generally across the globe. If you take things like Hinkley, it was the FID for Hinkley. So the approval for Hinkley was about 18 billion. Publicly, it's currently sitting at around about 36 to 37 billion.
Yeah.
It's probably going to go higher than that. So what you found is that in the last 15 years, that project delivery has got worse. Okay, so rather than maybe 2 or 3 months over over schedule and 10% over budget. The average today is probably 1 to 2 years behind schedule and anywhere between 30 and 50% over the original budget. Right? So a lot of the investors are going, even though you've got smaller reserves, even though the cost base has gone up, what we're really concerned about is project delivery.
Yeah.
And then overreaching that, without getting too political today, because I don't want to get political, but is EPL, so the Energy Profits Levy, which is currently sitting at 78%.
Yeah.
So that was designed in a different era when you had a lot more volumes, a lot lower cost, and you had the resource base that was sitting here for EPL, where that sits today. Today, both oil and gas should be different anyway, but EPL's linked.
Yeah.
So it basically, if you get oil to this price and gas to this price and it sits for a certain amount of time, then they would reduce it. Okay. So, but we have different mechanisms for oil and gas today, so they need to be changed. But then with the higher cost base and the more demands from the investors, the situation has changed completely from those old days. So as an operator, you're sitting there and you've got the sort of political environment, you've got the cost base environment to deal with, you've got the physical environment to deal with, you've got the supply chain to deal with, and you've got to make sure that you put all that stuff together. So you need to have lots of experience to actually exploit the fields in today's environment. So it's not as easy as just going, we remove the license blockages and everybody will start drilling in again in the North Sea. It's not as easy as that. We need to address a combination of things.
So what are they? The profit levy?
Yeah, it's the profit levy, first of all. I think there's a little bit where Meridian, we're what we call a gas and energy transition company. Okay? So we're not an oil company and we're not an explorer. Okay, so that's the absolutely key thing. So we want to look at gas in the UK and go, well, actually, got 28 million homes, mainly with gas on today. You can't remove those today and put air source heat pumps in, because you haven't got the power supply to those. The second thing is we still got the CCGTs there. So within because I was technical director with Centrica, so it was quite. I've been energy manager since 1981, so I understand the biggest things of energy, not just the oil and gas piece. So you need your base load, which is your nuclear. Okay, so it's quite interesting to see Centrica now. They're now going to go to the small modular reactors now, because the bigger ones just take too long and cost too much.
Okay,
but you need that base load. You can then have your middle load, which is all your renewable, but you still need peak demand. Okay, which will get bigger as we go more down electric cars and air source heat pumps. Because at the moment peak demand is probably about 10 gigawatts. But in 10 years' time, that could be 50 or 60 gigawatts. Okay, so you need to have that space. So you need to have the CCGTs there. But the other bit that's missing from gas is actually the process industries. So for instance, in Scotland, or most of our whiskey distilleries and a lot of our food processing uses gas for steam. Okay, so we've got gas there for domestic use, gas there for power, and gas there for processing plants and food and drink, and where that sits. And yes, we need to transition it, but you can't do that in 5 or 6 or 10 years. It's got to be a 30 to 50 year program. So for us, when we looked at it, we said, well, gas, you have to use your best is your indigenous gas in the UK, because that will give you your lowest footprint in terms of environment. Okay, so we've said that methane now is a transition fluid. And we should actually produce it as environmentally friendly as we possibly can. And then as we go through the next 2 or 3 decades, we will then add in, the CO2 aspects in terms of CCS. We can add in hydrogen and all those other aspects from it. So that's where the gas piece is, and that's where Meridian is in terms of taking that gas into that position. But it's difficult because of the environment that we're currently in today.
Wow.
There's a lot there, but it goes back to how difficult is it? I had so 3 pieces of advice I was always given, which I've always believed in 100%. If we're going to be really successful, which is basically always get a job where somebody really believes in you. That's absolutely the first thing where you need to be. So I was lucky. I had about 4 or 5 really good guys. Through my career, I went and spoke to them. It's a bit like me speaking to you today. You build a relationship with them, and they said, yeah, you might not have the exact experience, but because of who you are, I want to employ you. And I think that we need to do that. When I started off with venture, I took in a project manager, and again, I don't know if he'll mind me using his name, a guy called Scott Cameron, who's actually now a senior guy in Subsea 7.
Okay.
And he was a QS at the time. I said, you're going to be my project manager. And he said, I've never done a project before, and I'm not an engineer. I said, exactly, that's why I want you to be my project manager, because one, your career is based on it, so you would want to do a good job. And second thing, because you're not as well experienced, you will ask the right questions. And that job was absolutely fantastic by really believing in him to deliver that. So that's the first one. The second one is to have somebody that works as a coach or mentor with you, because, I mean, none of us are perfect.
No.
I'm far from perfect in terms of I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of failures, a lot of issues, and I still put my foot in it occasionally. But I always had a mentor for about 5 years, a coach that worked with me 5 years that actually helped me in the right direction personally. And then the third one was always pick the best people that you can possibly have. Doesn't matter, even if they're better than you. So that was the 3 sort of external advices that I got. Internally, there's only 3 things that count, which one is you must have a lot of passion for what you do. And I've loved thermodynamics and energy since I was a little boy.
Yeah.
And that's the only career I could ever see myself in, so I'm really, really passionate about it. The second one is when you do something, you commit to it 100%. So you don't take it. So even with Meridian, and I see a number of people do startup businesses, and they do it because they want a lifestyle change or they want to do something, but they're not really committed to it.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to go
All in.
Or nothing.
Yeah.
Because you can't be halfway with it. And the final one, which goes back to doing things differently, which is courage. It's easy to play the safe game all the time, but those that win, like someone like Phil Kirk and some of those guys when he set up Harbour and things, it's that courage to go, I've got passionate about it, I'm going to commit to it, but now I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And if I succeed, I succeed, and if I don't, I don't. But at least what I've done is I've given it a try.
Yeah.
And those things are really important. Now, in terms of my 3 external, 3 internal aspects, anybody in this industry, if you really want to have a good career, you need those 3 external ones and those 3 internal ones to really make it successful.
And when it comes to then, I guess, when it comes to your leadership style, and how has that evolved over the years?
Leadership style is quite an interesting one. I think when you think about leadership style, there's I guess I wasn't a natural leader. I'm very competitive, but competitive and leadership are 2 different things in terms of where you sit with that. And you have to build a leadership style through different things.
Yeah.
So I was quite lucky. I was in the Scouts and I become a Scout leader, and they put me through some leadership skills. That was really enlightening about different ways of doing things when you're dealing with. So I run a Cub Scout group for a while, and dealing with a bunch of sort of like 6 to 10-year-olds, you realise that their attention span is really small.
Yeah.
So you have to get fit. You have to do things you have to fun stuff, and then hard stuff, fun stuff, hard stuff, and things like this. And then, of course, I started martial arts. We ran a martial arts school in Aberdeen, and we had everybody from sort of like 4-year-olds right through to 70-year-olds. Different people. You learn to do things in a different way with those, and you learn different things. We learned things like with the 5 elements, which was everybody works together in different ways. So we use which is water, wood, metal, earth, and fire. Okay, and I'm a fiery sign.
Yeah.
But if I've got somebody's watery sign, I need to understand how to deal with those. So I learned that stuff from my martial arts thing. And then I'd done leadership skills with Beecham's when I'd done my executive management training. But the best 2 I learned was with AMEC and with Amoco. So with Amoco, when we done our leadership, with AMEC, when we done leadership training, I remember we done a thing about communication. about how you communicate effectively. And they put us into 4 groups, and we had the same problem to solve. And one solved it using star communication. So the leader sat in the middle, and he could only speak to the individual people, and that's how a lot of the industry tends to work.
Spoke, yeah.
The second one is what I call line communication. So I'm the boss, and I only speak to my team, who speak to their team, and speak to their team, and speak to their team, down and then back up the line. So there's a little bit of Chinese whispers that go along with that one. And then the third one was circular communication. So I could speak to that person on both sides. And then they would go around, so that they would go to the communication would go around in a circle. And then the final one was random communication. Now, the interesting thing was, you took the problem, the star communication couldn't solve the problem at all within 1 hour. Okay. The line communication could solve it in about 45 minutes. Okay, so they managed to solve it during 45 minutes. The circular communication could solve it in about 25 minutes. And they done, but the random communication, they solved it in 10 minutes.
Wow.
And that really sort of struck me and going, well, actually, forget all this, I'm the big oil company man, I've got to be in the center of it, and I've got to keep all the information, I mustn't tell anybody anything and all this sort of stuff. You thought, if I get everybody in the room and I talk to them equally together, and we're all equals, we get things done. Yeah. And so when we started up, going back to the venture model again, where I really put it into action, is we developed a partnership model with all the suppliers, and I requested all of them to be in the office with me on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock for half an hour, only half an hour, that was it. And there was about 30 people in the room, and they had 1 minute each. And they had to say what was their key issue from last week and what their challenges for this week. So they got 1 minute each around the table with everybody listening to everything all together. But at the end of that 30 minutes, everybody knew exactly what the position is and where we were going, and therefore what they needed to do. And then it was, right, Subsea 7, you speak directly to Ocean, don't meet me in the middle. Just go and sort it out and remove all the blockages and the wastages that you guys have got over there. All right, you two over there, Noble, you speak to GE on the tree. Go and get that sorted out. And as soon as you let go of the central control, and you let it distribute out, and you let everybody talk to each other, you find you get a lot better result. So when we was at the end of venture, which was probably out of everything, that was the pinnacle for me, I think, because we bought Kittiwake off Shell at the time, because it's about 12 months from COP. This is back in 2004, by the way. Yeah. Right, and Kittiwake's still operating today, only just, it's getting towards decom. But you go, that's 22 years after we bought it.
Yeah.
And they were, at the time, they were about a year to 2 years away from decom. We just said, well, we'll just buy it because we need something as venture. So Shell and BP, when we'd done Goosander, we'd done a couple other projects, we then had it operating at $20 a barrel on about 27,000 barrels a day. And we were making loads of money. Yeah. So Shell said, we got to find out why we sold this to them, and we missed it. All right. So they got the guy in Shell, they got BP, Shell, trying to think who else. I think there was Conoco, Chevron, and one other one, I think. And they wanted to benchmark what we were doing.
Okay.
And the outcome of it was we were 30% cheaper on unit cost. We were twice as fast, and we had less HSE problems than all those big guys put together. And that was the conclusion. But they couldn't do what we could do because we had very, very slimline processes. Yeah. And the way that we could talk to our suppliers allowed us a lot more open hand to what we could do.
It's the fact that these were inquisitive.
Yeah.
The fact that these were looking always for an engineering angle, I guess.
Yeah.
And then the communication side reduces those massive costs.
Yeah. It's getting people to think, that the innovation is not high risk. Innovation can be low risk, right? Because basically, as the world moves forward, if you stay in the same path, you die off.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to always look for new alternatives.
But even from a customer's perspective, you always need new customers. You can't continue on the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the same. It was the same like after I was down at Amoco, and it was in 1999. Of course, BP bought Amoco. So I was thinking, what should I do next? And I got offered the job as MD for Caverna. And that's where we brought Pat McIntosh back in with me at the time. So we were sitting there, and it had gone from like a £500 million business to about a £30 million business. It had a huge overhead, had liabilities, and everybody thought, I think there was AMEC, Wood Group, Brown and Root, a couple of the other ones were just trying to put the nail in the coffin of Caverna. Actually, I was speaking to somebody the other day who was on the other side, and he said, it surprised me how Caverna turned themselves around, and then suddenly became Aker Caverna, and then came Aker Solutions, and
So,
we better go on his stuff.
when you went in as MD, was it a £500 million business?
No, it was a £30 million business. So we had to, in that first year, we had to do something different with that. So I rearranged the team. First of all, got rid of all the overheads. We went down to about a £3 million overhead, talked away out of all the liabilities. There was some unpaid invoices, so we went in terms of, right, give us the money back. And then we started to look at how do we deal with our clients differently. And we created a scenario. We went through scenario planning, and we created what we called a base strategy, but an extended strategy. So we done things like, I said, well, we've got a big office and half of it's not used. So what we'll do, we'll open up 5 offices, and we'll get completely free of charge to startup companies. All right, so they can have an office completely free of charge for 2 years. We'll give them some support to help them start up their businesses, but on the basis that they then have to help us into their technology has to come to us first.
Yeah. So you bring in companies that suit your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I set up a thing called an alliance manager. So one of the guys, he's probably, if he hears this, he'll know who it is. I won't tell you who the name is. So his job is to create all the alliances with us. But then what we've done, because we're using a risk-based approach, we set up all our clients, and we gave them, there was 5 dimensions, and they got either in the top 20%, in the middle, or the bottom. And then the top 20% I really focused on, so like BP, and it was quite nice because we had all the subsea. So they used to have Annex D in BP, and I liked what we'd done so much. They moved all their subsea into the Caverna office.
Wow.
As an example from that. And then we had the middle group, which I really worked on. But the ones at the bottom, it was the project managers. There's only 2 options here. You either get the performance up, or I'll fire you.
Yeah. No,
maybe I wouldn't have fired them, but it was a bit of a threat to say, you
come on, move.
Yeah, don't just leave with second rate. And so we done that, and at the end of the first year, our overheads came down to, well, from about 30 million down to about 5 million. We turned over nearly 150 million from a 30 million at the beginning of the year.
Where did the work come from?
It came from BP.
Yeah.
Some work from Shell.
And was that stuff that was already sitting there? You just had to go and get it, or
it was some stuff that we developed. So some of the contracts we already had, and they just need to developing and expanding, which we done. And some of them were new pieces of work that we were doing. So we had all the Talisman work, for instance, at the time. So we got all their work right across their board.
Yeah.
Where that's at. And then of course the whole issue with the merger happened with Aker.
Yeah.
So I remember Schellinger Rocker coming across and flying across in his 737.
Nice.
And said, "Do you want a lift down to?" I say, "You go down to London. Do you want a lift?" And in your private plane. Okay. So little things. It was quite interesting at the time because Caverna was known as the James Bond of the contracting industry because it had flats all over the world. It was building a rocket launcher on a platform in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Wow. So who would that have been for?
I can't remember now.
Okay.
No, I can't. That was back in sort of 2001.
It's a random project.
Yeah. But so what we've done is I headed up the merger with Aker and Caverna and created the new Aker Caverna empire at the time, where we had field development, the modifications business, we had process safety, the subsea division. There's a couple of other divisions as well. So that made us. That's what became then the Aker Caverna village. I think it's still up there at Dice now. So it's quite a nice thing to do. But while I was doing that, every time I was at an event, I was sat next door to a guy called Bruce Dingwall. I don't know if you heard the name Bruce. So Bruce was the original founder of Venture.
Okay.
We for some reason or other, we were always put together. It was like serendipity.
Yeah.
Some things just happen in your life.
Just clicked.
And he said, Chris, will you come and work for Venture? After that sort of Aka Governa days, you see. So I said, yeah, give that a shot. And it's a little bit going back to the courage thing, because there was a guy called Chris Freeman. Chris was an ex-senior BP. He's still around somewhere. I think he's down south somewhere, but senior BP guy. And he said, Chris, I wouldn't use the language he said, but Chris, what have you done?
Yeah.
You know, you're heading up.
Pretty safe where you work.
You're heading up Aker Solutions.
Yeah.
You know, you've got you're on the BBC. You're on in the press. You've got thousands of people working from it, and you've gone and joined this 2-bid operation. I said, just wait and see.
And what was it then? It couldn't just be you bumped into the same guy 5 times at 5 events, and they convinced you to hand over everything and move to that. So
yes,
what was it about him that convinced you that was the right?
I think it goes back. It goes really back to my grandfather. Okay, so my grandfather was an engineer, and he wanted to leave a legacy, and he was a bit of an oddball. Right, he was never going to do anything that anybody else wanted to do. And I think if you look at my career, it's always gone up, and then it's come back down. Then it's always gone up, and it's come back. And the trouble is that when I love Venture, okay, and I did like it when I was technical director of Centrica. But as you get higher and higher up in the big corporate organisations, your hands get more tied into that corporate environment. Now, a lot of people like that environment in terms of the policies and the processes of what you can do, what you can't do.
But it was too restrictive for you.
I like to be a bit more of a free agent. Just the way I am. So if you look at me, when I joined Governa, it was next to nothing. We then build it all up, and I'm in the I'm going into Oslo to the board meetings and all that, and that's all wonderful. But the enticement of this new little oil company was just too much. It's like the honeypot type thing. And then if you looked at Venture, we built Venture. I mean, we got, in 5 years, we went from pretty much close, it should have been bankrupt. And 5 years, we got taken over by Centrica for 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
And it was going up and up and up. And I suddenly get this big job with Centrica's technical director. And you got stuff in Trinidad and Tobago,
everywhere.
and you got the because I had all the power division.
Yeah.
So it was all the offshore wind, solar, nuclear, CCGTs. We had all the gas storage division with Rough, and what we're trying to build new gas storage facilities and dealing with the government over how we could do that and things like this. And then I had all oil and gas. But again, I'm going, it's a 100-hour week job.
Yeah.
And you're constrained, and there's certain things I can say and certain things I can't say and stuff like this. So I went to the CEO and said, we need to redesign the organization. So I designed myself out of the organization, and then I left Venture. Because Mark came to me and said, what are we going to do with you now, Chris? And I said, well, as you haven't got much choice, you've got to make me redundant.
And was that your plan?
Yes, yeah. Because it was, and then I got off the interim role with Endeavour. And that was the same. It was actually, I joined Endeavour on the 1st of October, and I had to go to the main board in Houston on the 17th of October. And then over the next 15 months, we managed to completely turn it around. And we had an offer for the company after 15 months for $1 billion, from a company that had negative value 15 months earlier.
And what was the turnaround for that?
I think there was a number of things. One of the biggest ones was Alba. So we were one of the key partners on Alba, for an example. So again, thinking differently, you go, I can either leave Chevron with what they've got there and just say, well, there's the field development plan. I said, just accept it as a non-op, like most people do, and we'll just pay our dues for decommissioned securities and things like this, or we'll come up with something different.
So was it at that time then? Was that a bit of luck, or a bit of, well, there's nowhere to go anyway, we might as well just continue?
But you have to. At the end of the day, you either roll over and die. You go, enough's enough, or you go,
you get one more shot.
You have to be a fighter. And you have to go out and go, what else can we do? And this goes back to, with a small team, if you've got the right team around, you go, okay, so tell me, what are the alternatives? What can we do here? So we took on a company called Beltree which is a subsurface company in Edinburgh. And they looked at subsurface really differently. So they looked at the whole Alba field and they said, actually, you've got 15 other different potentials here where you could actually drill and get a lot more oil. And if we build that into the field development plan, then we don't have to put up any decommissioning securities in the next 12 months.
Yeah.
That makes a huge difference because we don't have to find 250 million then.
Yeah.
We can offset that for about 3 years.
Yeah, and you can drill.
Yeah. So, but then you have to convince Chevron that's the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Right. So because they were smaller, they only had about 27%, we could actually work with the rest of the JV partners and go, look, we've got this here. We think there's a lot more value in Alba than where it is because of the sites that we've got, and they're very easy and very cheap to drill. So would you come on board with us? And that's what happened. And then at the same time, we had Rochelle, which we're drilling onto Scott.
Yeah.
That was quite interesting because I think the week I came on board, they had a major problem. They were drilling it, and they got a big hole basically around the conductor.
Right.
And that was going to cause a whole bunching but we weren't going to be able to do anything with it. So we actually, again, I knew the guys at, I think it was the name of the engineering company now.
Okay.
I said, can you come in and do the stress analysis for us on this and see what we can do so we can keep the well. We can't lose the well because we can't afford to drill another well. So if you haven't got no money,
Yeah.
you've got to look at alternatives, right? So, and again, it's about knowing people that you know are really good at what they do and say, look, this is what I've got. I've got this. Okay. There is the stress mechanics say this, but there must be a way around it. Can you look at it differently for me? Which they did. And then we come up to a solution for it. And then we managed to save the well, get in there and then get the shell back online.
How long would that have taken?
We've done it about 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. Because it's that having that, if you've got that engineering background, that gives you that opportunity to look at things slightly differently. And there's a little thing I worked with, there's a guy called Professor Andrew Hopkins.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard the name, but he's a professor in Australia, but he'd done most of the analysis of things like Piper Alpha, Texas City. So he's a process safety guy, and he came across working with us with Centrica, and he said, as an engineer or a senior leader or manager, he said you always need a state of chronic unease. So always question everything.
Yeah.
And think outside the box when you do these things. So we bought when Larry Kinch he had a bit of a problem with EDP. Went in and we bought part of EDP, and one of the fields was F3FA. So this was a field in the Dutch sector, and they were going to make this self-installing platform.
Okay.
And if you want to have a look at it, you can see it. It's actually we were followed by the Discovery Channel for 2 years.
Right.
And that was when I first got involved with when I got on the camera and I used to talk too technically, and the producer says, no,
Too much.
too much. I said, just imagine you're speaking to your granny or your with a granddaughter type thing. But when we done F3FA, I'd go across and I go, I don't like that suction bucket on the end of there. I can't tell you why. I just don't like it. Where it is. And they said, no, we've done all the stress mechanics, everything else, it's all perfect, it'll all work. I said, what about doing mobilization? I said, yeah, so, because we're going to have it's going to be signed off that we can't go offshore unless there's more than 2 meter seas, so there won't be the stresses in it. But what happens if there is more than 2 meter seas? So keep asking and probing the questions. No, but that would never happen. So I said, no, I still don't like it. You need to redo it. Just assume there's 5 meter seas and tell me what you would do. All right, so they looked at it and go, well, it could be a bit bad. So what we'll do, we'll put some strengthening chains across on this thing, like this, just to satisfy you. Right, it'll cost you a little bit extra money, but we'll put them on there for you. So we put all these on there. Anyway, we start to go offshore, and we just get offshore by outside Rotterdam, and then suddenly we had this freak storm that happened. We had 7 meter seas. So we got this big unit, 200 million. And sitting on a barge like this, and there's 7 meter seas, and the port authority says, no way you're bringing it in here.
Wow.
Because if it tips over in the harbour, it's the busiest port in Europe.
Yeah.
We can't afford it. You just got to stick it out. So we stuck it out, and we got it out to site, and then we checked it all. It was perfect.
So without those chains,
it could have caused a failure.
Do you think it would have?
I have no idea. I wouldn't say yes or no.
Yeah.
There's a bigger chance it would have caused a fracture in the weld.
Yeah.
With that, but with those holding it in place, with those 7 meter seas, it was absolutely perfect. The same was similar when we done the Chestnut. I don't know if you heard of Chestnut, but it was a round FPSO.
Okay.
It was the first one in North Sea, And normally the naval architects, when they do the tank trials, so say they put it in a tank, right, it's got water in it, they take it through the center. They look at the wave height and the period, and they take it through the center to check that it works okay. And I'm looking at this and I go, what happens if you go down the outside edge? Yeah, but that will never happen. We're the experts. We know what we're doing. That will never happen. So, no, but what happens if it does? No, don't worry about it. It will. So can you just, it's my asset.
Yeah.
Can you just satisfy me? Can you just do a tank trial with it? And they come back and they went, oh shit. I said, when you go down the edge there, we get green water over the top of the deck. So what they've done then, if you ever look at the pictures, if you type online, you'll see pictures of chestnut. You'll see there's like this big baffle around the outside the top.
Okay.
So what we've done, we designed that so that if there was green water came across the top, it would actually baffle the water, so it wouldn't damage the process kit on the top deck.
Yeah.
And then after about 2 years, it was offshore. We had a freak storm. We went across that one, and there's a picture of the video cameras outside, the CCTV shows the water coming through the baffle and across the deck from that, which if that hadn't been there, would have swept somebody off the deck,
Yeah.
or it would have damaged the process plant. And as one of the other little bits of sort of wisdoms I had is that just because they're an expert doesn't mean they know the answer.
Yeah.
Always challenge the experts every single time, and don't be afraid of it, because quite often at times, if you've got a subsurface guy like one with Gusander, I'm not specifically a subsurface guy when it comes to geology or geophysics, and they go, that's the way it is. Yeah, but is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just ask.
Yeah, just have a look at it a different way, or just ask rather than challenge them. If you challenge them and go, you're wrong, then the shackles go up.
Yeah.
And it goes up. If you just go, could you just live with me a little bit? Can you just show me? Can you show me other ways that it could happen?
Yeah.
And you start to ask questions in a different way, then it gets them thinking differently, and then they go back and look at it, and then they go, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. You got massive passion for this industry. You can
Yes.
just pouring at you. So you're 65 this year. What's the future then for you? Because it doesn't sound at all like you're ready to be a man of the oil and gas history.
Yeah, it's strange. It's really strange because it's when I go back to my apprenticeship, there's the guys in there about 62, 63. They looked absolutely toast. They looked like they're ready just to finish.
Punch drunk.
And I think when my first job I started actually was I was still at school, but it was 72, and then a full time in 77. Since then, it's been a maximum of 4 weeks holiday a year, and probably an average of about 60, 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Because I do a full time job, and then I've always done stuff on the side, and then we've run a martial arts school for 20 hours on top of that. But I just feel there's still lots of energy left.
Yeah.
And so what I have done is I do need to promise my family that I spend some time with them, especially my wife.
Is that 4 weeks?
Yeah.
Is that...
No, a little bit more than that. I think, my Angie, we met in the beginning of 1981.
Okay.
We got married in 84, so we've married 41 years already. Got 3 children, 4 grandchildren so far. For me, working around the clock, working away, everything else, my wife deserves my time as well. From that. However, so what I've said is as I move into next year, I don't think I'll ever give up 100%. My grandfather and my grandmother, they were still playing around with stuff in their 80s and early 90s, I think. But what it does mean is to reduce my time, but then do things I love doing, So rather than just being, an executive and having all the worries and concerns of that, but to step back and say, well, I can be a mentor, or I can be an advisor, or I can work on special projects.
Do you have a big garage or a big shed at home?
No.
No.
Well, I have a garage. I have a garage, but that's tied up with something else. But basically, as I move into next year, it'll be, well, if there is a challenge in the North Sea with a gas development or an oil development, they said, look, could you come in and give us some advice on it, or work this through? Then I can come in and pull those things together. So things like done with ABNOC, we were working with ABNOC with Riskwell, and so the first thing I went done is we do this thing with Riskwell. We have this thing where we call it 3 elements. We have insights, and then capability, and then the tools and techniques. So the first thing is, how do you get insight? Okay, because quite often, you'll be in your role, and we'll have people around in their roles, and they'll know that what they know, but they'll also have quite a large number of blind spots.
Yeah.
There'll also be hidden data. There'll be stuff that people trying to keep away from them. And then there's the unknowns. Okay, so you hear the old Donald Roosevelt stuff, the unknown unknowns, but that's only one part of the picture.
Yeah.
It's how do you look at the blind spots and hidden data? So how do you bring that together? So if I can work on issues where I'm helping people get better insights to say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? That's the first one. The second bit is, which I really like, is the capability bit. So again, with what we're doing with Riskwell is we don't want a big company. We don't want lots of consultants working for us.
Yeah.
What we want to do is to give those skills to our clients. So whether it is how to frame something up better. So I'll give an example of this was I went into Dana with Knox. So they said, just as I want to do some engineering work again. So I said, would you come have a look at Triton? And so I came on board and I said, look, first of all, we got to understand what we're trying to do, right, which most people don't.
Yeah.
Right. So I ask a bunch of project managers, what are your objectives? And they usually say to get the project done on time and on budget. And you go, they're not objectives, they're goals. First of all, what are the objectives of the project? So what we've done with the 4 JV partners with Dana was we said to them, first of all, let's have a look at what your objectives are. So I use a thing called pairwise comparisons. I said, tell me what all your objectives are. So you write them all down there. And then we match the pairs up. We come up with the priorities. And then, so number one, being a small operator like Meridian is or Heart's Head or these guys, you don't have lots of cash.
Yeah.
Right? So the number one objective was no negative cash flow in any 1 year. Right? So that goes, okay, so take it into dry dock. There's no point even researching it or looking at it because
You can't afford it.
can't afford it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the first one. The second one was we want to extend the field life, but we can't do it all in one go. So can we do it in stages? That means that we can still protect the asset from an integrity perspective, but in 3 years or 5 years' time, we can decide whether we want to extend it more and then do it more like that. So we do it piecemeal type thing.
Yeah.
And the third one was an improvement in environmental performance from a reputational and a CSR perspective. And that got that project off the ground then, because I could go to our engineering contractor and say, look, these are the dimensions that we've got. We've got no negative cash flow in any 1 year. We've got an incremental view to life of field extension. And now we've got an environmental target. Now I want you to get all your red flags. So we go, everybody have a look at all the red flags for the whole asset. And then we can put all those red flags in there. We can then put them into clusters. We can then look at each cluster individually, but as a collectively, and then we can come up with a plan that will actually work. And we were asked by Bayes and HSC to look at that. And they came in with their inspectors and they looked at it and they go, we really like this, it's really good. Now we have a system that works because it was about getting the team, first of all, understanding what the prioritized objectives were, which is really, really important.
So obviously at Riskwell, business transformation and everything else you're looking at, where do you see companies fail?
Where do you see them fail? A lot of the time is very simple. It's basically have you heard the word VUCA?
No.
All right. So the world is in accelerating discontinuous change. That's a bit of a mouthful. Okay. But basically what it means is that if you went back and you looked at the 18th century to 19th century, you'll see a 10% change. If you look from the 19th to 20th century, you might see a 20% change. But if you take even 2000 to 2025, it's actually unrecognizable the amount of change that's going up.
Yeah.
So what you have is this thing called VUCA, which is the world is becoming more volatile, more uncertain, more complex, and more ambiguous. Okay. And therefore that we used to be able to spend a long time thinking about a decision. Now you've got to make a decision really, really quick.
Snapshot.
But for something that's 25 years ahead in the future. But however, most managers and boards, they're so focused on the here and now.
Yeah.
So if you ask them, what's your vision 20 years out? They look at you going out. Okay, but how can you make a decision today if you don't know what 5 years looks like or 10 years or 20 years looks like in the future?
Yeah.
Right? So
that'll become harder and harder, like
yeah.
you said.
Yeah. So there was some lots of studies done in the States. They said that 50% of all decisions that boards make and executives make are wrong.
Because they're short-sighted.
Yeah, yeah, because they focus on protecting today's profit margins and where they are today,
Yeah.
and they're less focused on tomorrow's growth and sustainability
So you
decisions.
want to be like an Amazon
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
run for 20 years losing money and then make all the money.
Yeah. So you need to have in today's boards, they need to understand what the global risks are. You need to understand what the energy risks are, and then how you make your decisions on that.
But these are changing day to day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we have, I mean, we've mapped it out. Actually, going back to Cook's Law and martial arts, we took the 5 elements and then we mapped those out as the 5 critical risks globally.
Okay.
So, and they're all, the thing is that most, even the governments, they look at how do they get into power next time, and they look at each risk individually, but not as a collective, and look at the consequences of those risks that come together. So if you take the 5 global risks, for instance, what we see number 1 is the economy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you need to have an economic stability. Doesn't necessarily has to grow all the time, but needs to be economic. Even though probably 25% of the world's countries are looking for a 230% growth over the next 25 years.
Not here.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got the economy, that's number 1. The second one, which people miss, is resource.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're using probably each year we use all the resources by July that year, and the rest of the year is unsustainable resources, but we're using them at a faster and faster rate. So you've got to look at those. The third one is energy. As we change, we can't keep using hydrocarbons, so we need to change that. What does that look like? The third one is really the population, the social position. As you see now, that because the amount of people there are on the planet, but the access to information, whether it's real or not, creates a lot of conflict, uprisings. You see even in the UK what's happened with certain things that are happening.
Elections, everything,
And then the final one is the environment, and you have to understand that in its right way. So for instance, we're currently sitting at around about just under 430 ppm of CO2. Which is, we know at 450 ppm that in the past the seawater levels have been 25 meters higher. Okay, and at 650 ppm they've been 75 meters higher. And you can ask the question why on that. Well, it's to do with you've got your normal tides, you then have surge tides, you have land subsiding back into the ocean, you have your glacier melt, but you also have thermal expansion.
Yeah,
and those are what creates those things. But also, while you're dealing with that, what's happening at the moment is, and it's you have to understand these things at this level, is that the magnetic pole is changing. I don't know if you know that at all, but it used to be quite close to Canada.
Okay.
And it's been moving at about 10 kilometers a year, but that's accelerating up to about 50 kilometers a year at the moment.
And what's causing that?
Because the whole world, if you imagine a gyroscope, and you put a lump on the center of the gyroscope, it's going to vibrate like this.
Yeah.
With climate change, with the Earth going, or the land going back into the sea, and then the glaciers melting, you're changing the balance of the Earth. So it's moving, which is actually moving the magnetic
around.
So it would take thousands of years, of course. I don't be alarmist at all, but there will be a point in the future where the poles will reverse. Right, so the south will become the north, and north will become the south. Okay, but a combination of the current climate conditions, along with the changing magnetic pole and various other aspects, you have to bear that into mind. There are a lot of natural aspects of it. It's not all about man-made things, but it's natural aspects. So you've got the 5 elements. You've got the economy, you've got your resources, you've got energy, you've got your population, you've got your environment, and they're all interconnected. So you have to understand how they're operating to get your best opportunity moving forward. And then when you drop down into the energy sector, we do need to move from hydrocarbons into other sources.
Yep.
Right. So I think you still need high densities. You need nuclear, whether people like it or not. You need a high density base source. You need your middle level source, which is your normal wind and solar. But also you need your peak demand. Okay,
and that's going to be much larger.
Yeah, and now that might be stuff like current hydropower, and also when you go into small scale, sort of small modular reactors and things like this. So the whole emphasis will change when you move there. But to do that globally in the next 20 years, we need to spend about $25 trillion. Okay, so you work that out, and you say a third of that is people to do construction. So you go $25 trillion. So roughly $8 trillion is people. Okay, so you work out that how many people that might be, and you go, we don't have enough people, right? Because the skills gap in the blue collar trades is too big.
Yeah.
Right. So again, when you look at it globally, you can start adding these things together and say, now I got a better picture of what my risks are, and now I can start making better decisions. So rather than the government going, well, let's just go green tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you go, well, you can't do that because it's an impossible task unless you start cutting back power per person.
So when you say businesses need to look 20, 25 years in advance or build towards that, governments need to be doing that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we were down. I was down at House of Commons reception literally about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the MP actually stood up and he actually said, as governments now, we've got to get away from the day-to-day soundbite politics, and we need to look 25 years ahead.
But even if you come up with a plan for 25 years from now and then start making changes to things now, the people that you're governing won't understand that. So you've got to come up with a story of how you're going to sell that as well.
Well, I think the difference is the plan. So when we done, it's actually, if I'd have brought it with me, you'd have seen it. When we done Caverna in 2000, the first thing we done was we created a scenario of 2025. And so the world actually is more...
How close were you?
Spot on. Spot on. Well, the thing is that we like to think the world is very uncertain and unpredictable.
Yeah.
And therefore, that based on that, if we make the wrong decision, it's not our fault.
Yeah.
Okay. Where actually the world is more predictable, and therefore you can work out. So if you take 25 years ahead from now, you can see where the population is going, you can see where energy is going, you can see where climate change is going, and you can see what we're doing with resources. So actually, if you put them all together and you start looking at that 25 years out, it actually gives you a really good picture of what it might look like in 25 years. So we then come up, we say, well, actually what we do, now we've got that picture, we have a base case. So this is what we think it should be, but we have a variance case down here, which is called the disaster case.
Yeah.
But also we have a major shift case up here. So what most businesses do, they get the base case and they go, there's our strategy, not the plan, the strategy for the base case, because strategy will always change and tweak rather than the plan that you're trying to fix. Over the next 25 years. That's our base case. But what very few do is what we had which I've always learned, which is what we called extended strategy, which is what takes you from your variance case to your major shift case.
Yeah.
So how can you always get to the best possible answer?
Yeah.
And there were some strategies in there. So you look today and you go, well, gas and energy transition is a great strategy. All right. So not about just going into wind farms or solar, but actually taking gas as an energy transition fluid and then look at energy transition in a bigger context with hydrogen and CO2, what you can do with CO2. For instance, can you get the CO2 and pump it into polytunnels to increase growth of vegetables? Because plants need CO2 to grow. Right. So are there other things that we can do when you move forward, when you start having those sort of levels of conversation, which makes life, that's what makes life interesting.
So to make sure these things happen, then what would you say would be a non-technical skill that should be taught to the next generation of leaders?
I think the first one is questioning, is getting people to learn to question properly. And then probing, and then trying to come up with alternatives. So that skill of doing those three things. So an example, because we go down the road of AI, and everybody talks about AI as the savior, and it isn't, by the way. It's another tool.
So what's your thoughts on AI?
AI, I think it's a great tool as long as you know how to use it. I'll give you an example. So most people know I've got a few health problems just at the moment. So I'm asking AI all these sorts of things you do, and you get completely paranoid that you're going to die and all sorts of things going to happen to you, especially with the people around you. and it can send you down a whole range of
Rabbit
rabbit
holes,
holes
yeah.
and things like this. And then after a while, I put this thing to it. I said, let me if I put a shower head on the back of my neck and my trapezius muscles go numb, what does that mean? And it says, oh, you've got a problem in the top of your neck with your cervical spine. So, well, that's great. So then you look at all your symptoms of that and you go, oh, that's what the problem is. Now, the doctor hasn't told me that. They've gone round and round in circles talking about all sorts of different bits and pieces. I've asked the wrong question 50 times, but then when I ask the right question, I then get my insight that I need. And AI is a simple thing, is what you need to have people that can ask the right questions not any question, but ask the right questions in the first place. So how do you construct the question is the first thing. The second one then is you need your knowledge base. So the knowledge has got to be there. So there's a lot of stuff out there that is information that might not necessarily be correct that can sway you.
Yeah.
So it's understanding
the
your
right
knowledge
data.
base. And then the AI is a useful tool to be on top of that, but only if it recircles back around to the individual. So you ask the question and you go, that's not quite the answer. So I'm going to ask a different question, or I'm going to probe at that question more till I get that insight. And I think that's where, you know, we have the world is based on don't question. You know, you don't question if you're questioning, you're an upstart, or you're someone it's not positive for industry.
Yeah, you're negative.
You know, you're conditioned along a discipline route. So I'm an engineer, or I'm a legal person, or I'm a finance person, or I'm somebody else, or whatever. And then you're held within sort of constraints within big corporates that you have to follow process and policy associated with that. But what we need in tomorrow's world, it's about getting people that will question, understand how to get the context for their questions and question the right things, but then follow those questions through until you've got the right insight to make the right decision. And I think that's absolutely essential for any youngsters coming through today, is learn to question rather just absorb.
Yeah.
You know, we can you talk about education, and I have never stopped learning. Yeah. Even every single day, I will learn something new, you know, and that way it adds to my portfolio of asking different questions. So you don't just get into the job and do your job. Look to learn every single day moving forward. And that's the most important part for me. And then get to understand, how do I ask the right question? Or how do I ask the right question in the right way if it's with a person?
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then we can enter into a whole bunch of different dialogue, rather than just acceptance of what is. But also not do like some of the pressure groups do, which is, I've got my view, and everybody else is wrong, because that's not good as well. We need people that can sit in the middle, that can actually really ask the right questions, probe it in the right way, get the right insights, and then get people behind them to actually drive the success that we're looking for, whatever that might be.
Chris, thank you very much. I think we could talk to you forever. You've just an absolute fountain of knowledge, but thank you very much for taking part today.
Yeah, hope that was okay for you. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.